So the other day, I made a tweet saying that the right was uncharacteristically quiet about Tulsi Gabbard's campaign because, well, I remember distinctly that Bernie Sanders, when he announced, he was berated, right? He's a socialist. He's a communist. He's a communist. He's a socialist. There's no such thing as democratic socialism. He's only a socialist. All he's ever been is a socialist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But it turns out I owe someone an apology. Tucker Carlson actually did speak about Tulsi Gabbard a couple of days ago. And what he said, well, it may surprise a lot of you, because it definitely surprised me. Take a listen.
Well, the media have been telling us about all kinds of Russia conspiracies for over 2 years now. It's a pretty simple model. You take a person or a group who you don't like, who are saying things you disagree with, and then you build a narrative that ties them to Russia. The latest example comes, as previous examples have come, from NBC News. NBC News is smearing anti-war Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard as a Kremlin favorite. NBC based the story on so-called experts, a group recently caught fabricating Russia stories at the behest of the Democratic Party.
Thanks? I don't even really... Listen, y'all. I know some of y'all watching that like, oh my God, this is some really good... Listen. First of all, let's talk about the fact that Tucker Carlson of Fox News did a better job of describing Tulsi Gabbard as a presidential candidate than anyone else in the mainstream thus far. Called her the anti-war Democratic primary candidate. With no animus behind his voice. He wasn't speaking sarcastically. He was being genuine. Because that is a genuine description of her. Now, every now and then, listen, Tucker Carlson can be way off base sometimes, right? He does work for Fox News, and he used to work for CNN before he worked for Fox News, so we know that he is indeed establishment. But every now and then, even the blind squirrel finds a nut. In other words, Tucker Carlson has been right on a few issues. He actually called out, obviously, Russiagate, because let's be honest, it's not really hard to see through Russiagate if anyone's paying attention. And that whole narrative is really getting just throttled in the mainstream. It's not as popular anymore, which is why you don't hear about it that often. Also, he got it right about Syria. He actually came out and condemned Trump for bombing Syria. So Tucker Carlson gets it right every now and then, so I don't want to make it, but it still was... Because like Tulsi believes in all the same thing Bernie does, except for she takes it a step further when it comes to foreign policy and making sure that we're not unnecessarily labeling people or demonizing leaders without first going to meet them where they're at. She tells the truth about our allyship with rebel groups, in other words, with terrorist groups that we use at our convenience. So it was interesting to see Tucker Carlson speak on Tulsi in such just a magnanimous way, to be 100% honest with you. Now, when Tucker Carlson addresses the Russiagate situation and Tulsi Gabbard as a candidate, when he addresses that in a more professional, more accurate, and let's be honest, it's just not full of the bullshit we've been getting from mainstream media. When he does that better than MSNBC, CNN, or any of the Democrats or their allies, where the hell are we at right now? And when it in the media world, where are we at? Where are we at in this campaign where Elizabeth Warren has announced, and I was expecting, not really, but let's just say for the sake of the argument, right? I was expecting them to do what they did to Tulsi Gabbard, right? So the moment she announced, well, we should have heard about her being a registered Republican until 1996, which would have been, about 25 to 30 years of her political career professional political career, she was a registered Republican. I would have thought she would have been berated with them. Because remember, with Tulsi Gabbard, they go back about till she was 21 years old. With Bernie Sanders, they'll go back even further about things that he supposedly did. Right? They bring up videos from when he got married to try and insult him. That's what they say, right? They insult him for, I've never really got that, but they insulted him for being part of the civil rights movement. It was really weird. I don't know. I don't get it. But they did. So I just knew that Senator Warren was going to get the same type of attacks, right? No, of course not. So where are we at? When Tucker Carlson actually does a better job of engaging with the legitimate left, with the real left, with the progressive left, like Glenn Greenwald, for example. Where are we at? When he's more willing to sit down and have a conversation about the facts. And he does lay out the facts. And the fact of the matter is that NBC article had been debunked. The fact of the matter is that what he said was right. Basically, anyone who disagrees with the establishment left, you're a Russiagate. You're a Russian. You're a Russian bot. You couldn't possibly formulate your own opinions. And yeah, we know that Obama legalized propaganda, or he allowed it, to persist in the United States whenever he signed off on that bill in 2012. And then we know that in 2016, the NDAA took it a step further by trying to establish a funding mechanism and a committee to further propagate propaganda. We know. So I'm not surprised by this. But Jesus, this is really where we're at, NBC? Tucker Carlson is outshining you as far as journalistic integrity is concerned? Fox News is outshining you as far as journalistic... They actually substantively address the issue. That's what's even crazier. They actually talk in detail about, well, why are they smearing her? Oh, because she's an anti-war candidate. And then Glenn Greenwald even goes on to detail exactly why it seems like she's coming under attack, not necessarily for her domestic policies, because she's single payer, all that good stuff. Yeah, but she's getting smeared to a different level because of something a little bit more nefarious that has been in play since 2014. Let's hear what Glenn Greenwald has to say.
But what's so interesting is all of these smears comport precisely with neocon orthodoxy. And it seems like Tulsi Gabbard's sin was violating neocon orthodoxy. Or am I reading too much into this?
In 2014, and you can go Google this, there's an article in the New York Times, an op-ed by someone who has tracked neocons for a long time, saying that it was clear that there was rising isolationism and anti-war sentiment in the Republican Party, and neocons were therefore migrating back to the Democrats, especially in excitement over the prospect that Hillary Clinton would be the nominee for president in 2016, and that she essentially has a neocon foreign policy. She supported the war in Iraq. She supported regime change in Libya. She was highly critical of Obama for not doing more in Libya, for not arming anti-Russian factions in Ukraine. They love Hillary Clinton, and they were migrating back to the Democratic Party. So Democrats have become reunited with neocons. So anyone who deviates from the neocon agenda, whether on the left or on the right, instantly gets accused of being an asset or a stooge of the Kremlin. And that's what they did. And NBC, in this case, relied on a firm that just got caught 6 weeks ago fabricating Russia data. They got kicked off Facebook for doing it. And that was NBC's leading, quote, expert for claiming that chatter shows that the Kremlin is now favoring Tulsi Gabbard.
So once again, let's go ahead and call a spade a spade. Tucker Carlson, impressed, saying she's violating neocon orthodoxy, right? For him to say that is a pretty big deal, because he's acknowledging that there is a neocon orthodoxy of go to war, spend the money, get the big contracts, piss people off, steal their oil, come back, make up another excuse to go to another war. He's acknowledging this, and he didn't try and like bait or guide Glenn Greenwald into maybe speaking about neoconservatives or conservatives in a positive light in this regard, he actually let Glenn Greenwald go on a tangent about how bad neocons are and how they took over the Democratic Party. And he sat back and listened and didn't even argue with him about it. What is going on? But listen, Glenn Greenwald is speaking on something that is, I mean, if it isn't evident, the fact that neocons have taken over the Democratic Party, I don't know what to tell you. But what he is speaking about is the article, the New York Times article he's speaking about was written on July 5th, 2014. I'm going to read you a couple of lines from this article. I don't want to read the whole thing because it's a bit convoluted, but I mean, if you listen to the tone of the article, it's very clear. This is 2014, before Donald Trump ever announced, right? Mind you, a lot of this article is talking about people, neoconservatives specifically, who have already asserted and basically established that they knew Hillary Clinton was going to try and take over and that there was a good chance that she could win. So, Washington, after nearly a decade in the political wilderness, the neoconservative movement is back, using the turmoil in Iraq and Ukraine to claim that it is Obama, not the movement's interventionist foreign policy that dominated early George W. Bush era. Washington that bears responsibility for the current round of global crises. Understand that a lot of Obama's staff was neoconservative. So that's what he's referring to, including Hillary Clinton, right? So even as they castigate Mr. Obama, the neocons may be preparing for a more brazen feat, aligning themselves with Hillary Rodham Clinton. Did we not find out that she was planning on anointing mostly neoconservatives to her cabinet, to her administration? And her nascent presidential campaign that hadn't even been announced yet. So this is how much this is really an example of how anointed she was. Like, they knew. This is July 2014. She didn't announce until what, summer 2015-ish. So they knew a year in advance. Yeah, this is Hillary's about to take over the reins, or try to. And they say it's going to try to align themselves with Hillary's campaign in a bid to return to the driver's seat of America's foreign policy. Did we not see that? Did we not see that? Another line from the article says, still, Democratic liberal hawks, let alone the left, would have to swallow hard to accept any neocon conversion. Mind you, they are, because they tried to convert. Think about where we're at right now in the political environment involving just specifically the Democrats. He said they don't have to swallow hard to try to make a neocon conversion because it's not going to work. Basically, you can try it, but this is where we're left: a splintered party, where everybody's playing the blame game. Hillary Clinton, gets no accountability, nor does she want to take any. And she left the party out to dry as she tried to convert them into neocons. And it didn't start, it didn't start in 2014. Really, it started the 90s when the Koch brothers started donating to the Democrats and winning them elections and writing their policies. So, funny enough, I like how Glenn dropped this article because he got name dropped in the article. Mrs. Clinton herself is already under fire for foreign policy views. The journalist Glenn Greenwald, amongst others, has condemned her as a neocon. She's like a neocon practically. I mean, she is. So this lets you know also, they say, oh, these were right-wing conspiracies that are touted about Hillary Clinton. 2014 July, people. 2014. Everything is a right-wing conspiracy, and then we come to find out that the New York Times writes an op-ed or has an op-ed talking about the fact that she courted them. She welcomed them. This was already in the works. How is it right-wing conspiracy to call you a right-wing sympathizer, basically is what she is, when is the left, the establishment leftist publications on top of that, who are calling you out for your neoconservative ties? But we were right-wing conspiracy theorists for telling the truth about her. And humanitarian interventionists like Samantha Power, the ambassador to the United Nations, who opposed the Second Iraq War, recoil at the militaristic unilateralism of the neocons and their inveterate hostility towards international institutions like the World Court. Because we have. Remember when we just totally ignored the World Court regarding the Iran conflict? That's when we started pulling out from all of our treaties and stuff like that. And we totally ignored them because, let's be honest, like, we're not going to allow anybody to hold us accountable for anything. But others in Mrs. Clinton's orbit, like Michael McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia, and now a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, a neocon haven at Stanford, are much more in line with thinkers like Mr. Kagan, Mr. Boot, especially when it comes to issues like promoting democracy and opposing Iran. So basically, this is the article that Glenn Greenwald was talking about, where she basically drenched herself in neoconservatism and aligned herself with them before she even became president. So this is that article that really shows that the Democrats had already started this conversion and they were more than willing to accept it. And that's why they're attacking Tulsi Gabbard. That's why Tulsi Gabbard is the enemy. It isn't necessarily the progressives of the party, like Barbara Lee, for example, Ro Khanna, for example. Obviously AOC, another example. And a few others, Jan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they're not attacking Tulsi Gabbard. They've actually agreed with her on 98% of the issues. It's the neoconservatives who crept their way in, or the ones who may not have been neoconservative before. However, they took a lot of money, and so now they're in the pockets of the neoconservatives. Those are the ones who now control the networks. Obviously, the money that controls the networks, neoconservative. The money that controls the politicians, neoconservative. So these are the ones who want to see Tulsi Gabbard stopped, and they're spreading lies, people. Why do you think neo-McCarthy? It's no coincidence that neo-McCarthyism shifted from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. As we were finding out in 2014, that neoconservatism and isolationism, neoconservatism as far as being war hawks versus isolationism, which the Republican Party for the most part represented and was turning to, according to this article, in the Obama administration a little bit later on. It shifted. All that animosity towards foreign countries, neoconservative policies, that shifted into the Democratic establishment. And here we are. So now you're hearing attacks that would have before came from the Republican Party primarily. You're hearing them come from the Democratic Party because they are actually the neoconservatives now. What a web we weave. So thanks so much to Tucker Carlson for having an honest conversation with Glenn Greenwald. Thank you very much, Glenn Greenwald, for bringing that information to our attention. And make sure that you continue to stay diligent. Just everybody, make sure you're staying diligent in correcting people and in putting out information like this, that's telling the truth about those like NBC, MSNBC, CNN. We need to make sure that we are holding them accountable and telling the truth about not just Tulsi Gabbard, but all the candidates. Because they're lying on Tulsi Gabbard, but they're also lying on Kamala Harris. They're lying by omission regularly about Kamala Harris. And so we have to make sure that we're taking the steps necessary to hold them accountable and correcting people and drawing connections like this, where we have seen this transition from the Republican establishment or Republican neoconservative establishment transforming into the Democratic neoconservative establishment, which is why you haven't heard many attacks coming from Republicans regarding Tulsi Gabbard. Actually, a lot of them support her as a veteran and as a leader. But instead, you've heard Democrats who have become neoconservatives attacking Tulsi Gabbard. Thanks for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. You can donate to our Patreon and keep helping the network grow by clicking on the link in the description below. And also, make sure you join us at JustNForm.com. And finally, make sure you subscribe to us on Roku and be part of the very first independent news network on Roku TV. But more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.